So, my name is Elizabeth Joseph, and this is another brilliant and exciting episode of Nothing But the Tea, because you guys know that we like stories. If you've been here before, you'll know that. Ons hou baie van praat. Nie net met mekaar nie, maar ons hou ook van ander mense se stories. That's why I have two lovely guests with me today in studio, not only to give their views and opinions on the topic, which of course is trauma and how to navigate that into healthy relationships, but also just to give a bit of a story time, you know, just to give a bit of a, like what your experiences have been with trauma, with relationships, and how did you deal with that? So to my left, we'll start from my left and then, yeah, we'll go along. Please introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jemima Ndebele. I am just a masterpiece trying to masterpiece.
I love that. It's probably a quote from some inspirational person, motivational speaker.
Some philosopher or something. Well, they know me and they call me Kotadi. But my name is Desiree, just kidding. My name is Desiree, and I'm excited to be on the podcast. This is my first time here.
Welcome.
And I'm excited about the conversation and dissecting all of that. So, yeah.
You know, guys, I think it's the fact that we are all laughing right now, and hopefully, not even hopefully, in the next few minutes we'll start crying, because this is such a heavy topic. I feel like the moment I introduced it and I spoke to some colleagues and I was just running it past everyone, I was like, oh, trauma and navigating that into healthy relationships. People were like, oh my God, it's so heavy. You know, most people were like, I don't want to be on today's show, maybe the next one, and talking about Snapchat and all those things that we are into these days. But I think it's a dialogue that deserves to be had. I think it's important for us as young women. People might say, no, we don't have a lot of experience, but I'm sure that each story carries its own weight. You understand? So I want us to go into what trauma is and how, to a certain extent, it has either contributed to a relationship or how it has morphed. It doesn't even have to be a romantic relationship. It can be a work relationship. It could be a friendship. You know, how has your trauma touched the relationship that you might care a lot about? Let's start with Jemima. What do you think about that?
Well, firstly, I'd just like to comment a little bit on what you said earlier on about how people are so against speaking about trauma, but I think that is the point of media as a whole, just to make these heavy topics digestible. You know, break them into bite-sized pieces from people who you think are relevant and relatable in order for you to then speak about it. Because if we don't do it in these spaces, will we then ever? But in regards to trauma as a whole, I think trauma is anything that has previously made you uncomfortable in your skin and in a space. And not just temporarily, but more so permanently.
And continuously.
Exactly, and continuously. And I think that's why whenever people talk about the opposite of trauma, they associate it to a safe space. You know, whenever you talk about healing, there's always a safe space. So I think trauma is the absence thereof. Trauma is the absence of a safe space. So I think that is very important. But also, spaces isn't just physical, but it can also be the emotional space that you occupy in someone's life, because somebody could also traumatize you emotionally. I think that is mostly what we associate trauma with. So if that emotional space then isn't safe, then it's trauma. Yeah.
Desiree, I think what one thing that I took away from what Jemima said is that a lot of the times when we speak about trauma, we automatically take it to emotional, but what about the physical aspect? You know, like we always hear about, if it's not domestic abuse, then it's perhaps anything. I don't want to now make it too gruesome, rape, all these things. Like, what type of effect and what type of emotional baggage does the physical aspect also give you? And how do you then, is there even a way to navigate it? I feel like you just marco with the flow and see.
You know, like, I feel like, obviously, I can only speak from my experiences,
Of course.
you know, and you guys mentioned, you mentioned physical, and you also mentioned emotional, and then we also have mental, you know, because trauma is a serious thing, you know, and I wouldn't say that I've had a lot of traumatic experiences, but what I can say is something that, you know,
Like a
what I don't
Like the
wanna say-
vulnerability is completely taken away
you
from.
know, so for me that has been very traumatizing because it's essentially making me love people in a way that I wouldn't love them if it was up to me.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that I've had like a in detail like traumatic experience or anything that has scarred me till today, other than like trust issues or whatever, which I think most people have.
And I think it's fair for a lot of us to have trust issues. For me, I've dealt with a lot of trauma. I've dealt with from abusive relationships to parents walking out, or a parent walking out, and essentially that perpetuated the way I then saw relationships.
Yeah.
You know, romantic
How-
relationships. Exactly.
I was gonna ask like how does it affect
It's a
especially your
lot.
romantic
Because
relationships?
you have you can just shift a little bit closer to me. I like to feel you guys close. Yeah, so I think to a certain extent I had the fear of abandonment. I would always feel that I would sabotage the relationship even before it took off, because the moment there's a little hint of silence and uncertainty, and where I just feel perhaps not heard, or I'm the only one fighting, I would immediately do this, literally, and then I would just allow you then to take the lead. Because at that moment, in time, I would just be emotionally unavailable. I cut off. And then people always used to ask me, why do you move on so quickly? And I believe that because of the trauma that I've endured, it's kind of systematic to me to already lose not myself, but kind of like let go of the reins while still in the relationships, and then I kind of give it a grace period of 2 to 3 months just to feel it out. Like, does it change? Is the emotion going to be constant, or is what I'm feeling at that moment, is it going to change? But then at that moment, I'm already emotionally unavailable. I'm already gone, you know. And then I break up with the person, and then 2 months later, I'm in love again, or I'm with someone else. And as you said, you're a lover of love. You know, I love to be loved. I love to give love. I think one day Jemima and I had a conversation, and she said that she has so much love to give, you know, and it's never just a thing of no, she wants to receive love, but also just the amount of love that I have to give. I never feel like the trauma and everything that I've dealt with in my life has ever made that any less. Because I give as much as I gave in my last relationship, I give it again and again and again. So to a certain extent, I feel like I've dealt with it quite good. I'm still
have
dealing
you
with
dealt
it.
with it? Because it doesn't sound like you've dealt with it.
I
think you have become accustomed to it. Like now you're so used to it, but you haven't actually dealt with it. And we low-key had a conversation, you and Esther and myself, the other time about like dealing with not necessarily trauma, but
how
like,
do you know whether you've healed?
you understand?
I think just because I'm speaking so passionately about it, I think I see the change and the growth in the way I deal with communication, for example. Today I'm going through like a lot right now in terms of my relationship and communication, and I feel like it has so much to do with trauma that has not been dealt with, not from my side, because I feel like you know, like abandonment and the abuse and all of that. I feel like I'm growing still. I have not fully healed because it still hurts, and I still have my walls up so high. But every moment that I live in, that I love, it's a moment that I take that I'm growing because my communication is better. I don't sabotage relationships anymore. I try to be more vulnerable going into a relationship because I understand that where the person is sitting, I sat there. I used to be the person that whenever you would point out a flaw, or you'd point out, Elizabeth, I don't like this, or I don't like that, I'd be like, okay, if you don't like it so much, then leave. You know, I don't need anyone. I'm cool. But now I'm like, I actually do need this person to a certain extent. I need you in my life.
I think a big part of like dealing with your trauma is understanding it.
Yeah.
As soon as you understand it, you can be like, you know what?
Acknowledgement,
I'm not going to allow this to control my life. I'm not going to allow this to push people away, you know? So I think understanding it is a big part of like healing from it. Another thing that I actually also wanted to touch on was like, you know how you spoke about abandonment issues, and you actually mentioned a lot of things that like I can relate to. I can sabotage something like this, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. And it also comes from as soon as I feel you are starting,
shift.
you know,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
behavior, consistency.
I hate that for
But
overthinkers.
I think that also comes from like experiences with people
Yes.
breadcrumbing you into relationships. Because after you've been breadcrumbed into a relationship, you're like, but you're actually not giving me anything.
Anything,
You know,
yes.
so now that you're actually in a place where you're actually in the bakery, you know, now
It's
this
the analogies for me, sister.
now that you're actually in the bakery and the baker is busy baking the bread, you're like, okay, no, you're probably breadcrumbing me. I'm gonna dip.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of thing. But in addition to understanding your trauma, I think it's not just understanding, but it also goes as far as comprehending, because there's a different. I think sometimes it's like, yeah, I know
You acknowledge, I'm needy.
Yeah, I know
Why?
I'm needy.
Yeah.
I know I have daddy issues. I know I have mommy issues. Let's not deal with it. But it's also about dealing with it, because I have a very good friend of mine would always say, somebody can only meet you as far as they've met themselves. And I think that ties very deep into navigating your trauma and like healthy relationships, because if you and I want to delve into a relationship and want to build something, then I say, for instance, I'm big on introspection. I know my shortcomings. I know my strengths, my weaknesses, and I know what I deserve, and I know I know my love language, and you know, you don't.
Yeah.
How
never gonna
you know,
work.
it's never going to work.
It's never gonna
So it's
work.
also about being with somebody that's, I think that's why my biggest red flag would be, if you're not willing and able to go and see a therapist, what are we doing?
Like
And
people that say this for rake mense.
What are
No,
we doing?
guys,
What are
no.
we doing?
Not,
Because
not.
healing is so important. Healing is so important, because imagine if because the thing is, there's also something like familial trauma. So say for instance, you and I were together, we're vibing, kimunati, life is lekker. And then we get married, we decide we're going to start a family. And I spoke to Octavia about that today when we went out for lunch. And I told her, dude, if my future partner and I are not willing to go to therapists together before we start a family, it's not going to work. Because I don't want my children to sit with my emotional
Those
baggage from
generational-
years ago. Generational trauma is a thing, and this is not a conversation that young people are having, because their parents are also so afraid to talk about it because they don't want to deal with their trauma.
Because then you'll have to
Ex-
take the not the punch, but you'll have to then be held accountable as a parent. You'll have to be held
Exactly.
accountable to say, but you did this, and this made
Exactly.
me, it kind of drew the blueprint of my life. So
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
also wanted to add something on that. Like, I feel like it's also very unfair for somebody to, you know, you have issues. And you know that you have so much to work on as an individual.
And you're emotionally unavailable.
But you still put yourself in a position to make this somebody else's problem. I think that's
dis
the
waar hy
selfish
Bob de
thing.
Bilde goede inkom.
Exactly.
That's
It's
why
the most
you-
selfish thing.
I hate that.
And
ever.
it reminds me of that Bob Marley quote that says, "A man that awakes
Yeah.
awakes love in a woman with no intention to love her is a coward."
100%.
Because now
Phew.
I have to sit
A
there
little
and
louder for the
I
people in the
mean,
back.
yell in the back. Because now you're putting your partner, or in this case, your potential partner, in a position of feeling like mothering you. And then at the end of the day, you complain because you're being mothered. But it's like I saw a reel this week. I don't know if you guys know Shan Budi.
I know Shane Budi. I love
I
Shane
love
Budi.
her. So she had a conversation with Cammie Crawford, and they were discussing what it is or what it was like for Cammie to go through a breakup and so on and so forth. Long story short, they said that Cammie actually said that she took on the more traditional masculine role. So she was basically leading the relationship. In this regard, I feel like the moment you give all of your baggage and al wat hy goeders is, you put it on me in order for me to tell you, okay, now let's communicate, to continuously initiate communication. Let's resolve this. Let's do this. Let's do that. That's like me mothering you, but to a certain extent,
100%.
I have to ek moet die ding stoot.
Jy moet iets
Ja,
doen,
ek is die ene wat die kar ry.
something.
Now you're
Yes.
telling me I'm mothering you, I'm controlling you. Why? It's because I didn't experience that the leading, you know.
It's also, I think it's also,
You go.
Not all at the same time.
I think it's also important for you as Bob the Builder to realize, nee man, maar dis mos bleep.
Die mos was my cement.
You
Yeah,
understand?
no.
Like, this person is genuinely wasting my time. Because, like, not long ago, I was in a situation with a guy. And, like, you know, we were... So, like, this guy, he was consistent in the sense that, like, he is elke dag text. He will come pass by to come say hi.
Oh.
But for me, I am a like of things, and I need more than that. Like, I appreciate the thought, but let's go somewhere. Let's go watch movies. We don't even have to do anything crazy expensive, you know. Just like, hear me out. I'm like, you know what? Let's go do something else. Ons kan mos nou nie altyd in die kar sit nie en altyd net.
I mean, it's a for
You
me.
know? And like, this gent is like, when I speak to him, it's like he's hearing me, but like, he keeps repeating and repeating.
It's like
and
jy hoor
repeating.
maar jy luister nie.
Verstaan jy? So in a
man.
case like that, you need to think to yourself and be like, do I deserve this? Because I know I can do better. You get me?
And
You get me?
side note, gents, we're not attacking you.
Not-
Honestly, we're not
not-
attacking anyone. This is, I feel, just a platform. We're just
Yeah.
venting. You know, we're just
Honestly,
unpacking.
yeah.
And it's the
Maar
same-
honestly,
it's the same
on-
concept as
Improve, man.
it's the
Yeah,
same
improve.
concept as like if a guy is dating a girl and like she's always in a certain space that makes it unhealthy for the relationship, and he always has to tell her. Then you know this person doesn't care. If you tell somebody something more than twice or once,
Especially if it's something that's detrimental to,
To
the
the
relationship.
relationship.
Nie die klein goede
100%.
van tel jou sokkies op
Op.
oor en oor en oor. Guys, honestly, those are things that we can improve. We're talking about concrete stuff.
You know,
like
things
work
that-
on yourself.
things
friend.
that build this
Yeah.
relationship. 100%. That's why it's important for you to put yourself first. You know, put yourself first. Work on yourself, and then the other things can come. Because at the end of the day, you are now just making yourself a baggage.
En is nie maklik nie. Oh, daai goed is nie maklik nie.
It's
ouens.
not.
The thing that I've seen is it's very rare to find a person, and I'm so sorry. I know this is not going. It's not an umbrella term that I'm going to use right now, but a lot of the times I've seen that healthy, constructive, opbouende verhoudings. Those are the people always come out of stable households.
You think so?
Like
Yes.
loving. I think
You
just
think so?
speaking on my own experience, the one relationship that I've had that had healthy communication to a point where I felt very uncomfortable with the conversations that this person was willing to have with me in order to set our relationship into the right motion. The person came from a household. It was not perfect. It was far from it. But he explained to me once, because I was so confused. I was like, "Nee man, deal. Like, why do you always like talking? It's forever. Elizabeth, let's have a talk. Let's have a sit down. Let's go through this." I feel like there was a shift in your
Behavior.
in your behavior. What happened? Let's discuss it.
Yeah.
I asked him, "Dude, wat gaan aan jong? Like, how's he van goed of do you just like to talk or what?" Then he said that he's always seen his father do that with his mom. And they would never, it's not arguments in front of them and stuff. It's always a thing. It's very gentle. It was very gentle. And it was so imperfect that he said that it's not really a relationship that he would look up to and say, this is a blueprint. But he said that the way his father spoke to his mother and the way they resolved their issues within their chambers, I want to call it chambers as per the Bible's, but those chambers, it's so sacred, your room. He would take the mother in there and then they would resolve it. They will
problems,
come
yeah.
out, that's miskien nog bietjie J, but for the sake of the kids, there was a portrayal of, we've resolved it. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. But we were both at fault here. We communicated. And I felt like that was probably the most, that
can
didn't work out.
actually-
Ons is nie weet, Sammy, maar, but that really
I can
helped me.
relate. I can really relate to that. First, when you said it, I was like, and maybe it's because maybe it came from like a defensive point of view, because I didn't grow up in like a mom and dad.
Yeah,
household.
yeah.
I grew up with like a single mom, and
Same.
I did like date a guy who grew up in like a stable household per se, and he communicated so well. Elke klein dingetjie, you're right. You seem, you know,
Yeah,
you
you,
see-
you even feel like, yo, maybe
That's
I'm
why
the
the problem.
problem.
I'm like, and I knew I was the problem at
You
this point.
know,
I was
same.
just like, sorry, lost me, ma.
Same. Like I knew I was definitely the problem, because all the arguments we had, it was my fault. Like it was because I did something or I didn't.
Dan
do
is jy nog
something.
narcissistic and then you're like, no, but it's your fault. Maar kan die ear in the back of your head, you're just like, oh, Elizabeth,
You
change,
know?
girl.
And I think that for me is one of the reasons why, guys, as much as Umjola's lekker.
My
Oh,
dear.
smart.
I refuse to have kids out of wedlock because
Same.
I am getting
refuse.
chills, guys. You don't even
Yo,
understand
yo.
how. Oh my God.
I refuse because like I love my mom for being my mom and my dad for the longest time. And like she showed me what a strong woman looks like. She showed me that like without a man you can achieve any and everything. But at the same time I did see the gaps. Like I saw where my mom couldn't handle things where my dad could have potentially or
Stepped
a
in.
father figure
Yeah,
could
yeah,
have stepped
yeah,
in.
truly.
You get me? So I want my kids to grow up in that type of household where, let's say, for example, I have a son, I really want sons. And there are things that I know that, you know, sons listen to their dads a bit more because the dad is a bit more stern or whatever, you know. But like, if I have a problem with my sons, I want a dad to be able to step in. I want to be able to be like, praat toch met jou kind.
Yeah.
You know?
Ek ben ons hou tog van goed julle.
You know?
Ek hou van ook van daai and I think sorry Jemima, I feel like you've been quiet and this is not a trait for Jemima because she's say praat altyd ons ore af maar ons hou van dit. But I just quickly want to touch on that. I feel I really want to raise my kids in a household that's not going to be perfect. Of course, nothing can be perfect or flawless. But I really want that structure. I want both parents to be emotionally healthy. I want us to have emotional maturity
And
and intelligence.
psychologically.
Yes, it meen nou nie daar's baie ookies nie like the insecurities just got the hang of it like of hulle it just took power. Dan sal hulle altyd sê jy hou jou slim. Die ding ons is in die TV. Maar ons sê in die
That's the
TV nie
fun
gents.
guy in
Die goed is waar. Why are other relationships? Why are other families so strong and so healthy? No, ons kan mos ook daai goede doen. Is nie TV se goede nie, please. Die TV se goede. Daai mense sien dit iewers. They see it somewhere.
And
Where
they
did they
see
see
that
it?
it's
So
working.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah.
that household.
and I think in addition to what Elizabeth was saying about, you know, communicating and how you gave the example about your ex-boyfriend or whatever, I also experienced that. And it's not just the person comes from a healthy household, but it's also your ability to try and be better.
Be better.
Because that
100%.
in itself is so powerful. I was dating this one guy.
No, you date.
Look at us all shocked. You did.
Yeah, I do. Keep it under the wraps.
It's live.
So he would always say whenever we'd have a disagreement, and I didn't even notice it until a friend of mine brought it up, a very close friend of mine, but she was always in the vicinity. And then she would say, dude, you know what I really admire about your relationship? I'll be like, what? And she said, the fact that when you guys have a disagreement, it's not you are the problem or this is the problem. It's like, this is the problem and
this is
we are
us.
going to solve it. You
I love
separate
that.
yourself from the problem and then you resolve it. And I think that's one of the reasons it lasted so long, because it was like 5 years or so. I think that was really the reason, because communication, it was easier because we recognized that, look, I don't have a problem with you are not the problem. I have a problem with what you do, you know, not what you are.
But then some people can't. They can't.
Differentiate.
Yeah,
Exactly.
everything is always an attack.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Everything is an attack. Even if I tell you, Desiree, I don't like the way you spoke to me just now, in a
Then-
very chill tone. Yeah, ma da 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 da. Do you understand? And I understand that. I was there. I come from a very, very toxic household. I come from abuse. I come from abandonment. I come from all of these crazy things that no one is supposed to go through ever. You know,
Ever,
it's things that break you. You'll be 30 and you'll still be crying about it. You're like, oh my God, is this a trauma that I'll ever get over? So I was never the person that could communicate. The people in the workplace, they know that everything, I always took it as an attack. I used to feel so attacked. Iman ganet for me say, Elizabeth, your story was not in the folder. I'm like, yeah. So just no comic en ek gaan jou attack. Even after work, ek sal nie met jou praat nie, those things. So I understand that it's very difficult to also be in a position where you constantly feel attacked. And I knew that when I started communicating better, I knew that I have grown. Ek het gegroei and I'm not perfect. I'm still dealing with it every day, but I'm trying, you know. And if you try, it's very.
There's a construction.
I mean, I think
company.
that like you can always teach somebody how to love you guys. Like
Yeah.
not everybody that you meet is gonna know. You know what, Elizabeth likes it like this, and she
Yeah.
likes it like that. So you can always adjust. You know. But for me, when it comes to like changing somebody or like trying, like I've given up on that because I don't think that's my place. I think that's for you to do. Like it should come from you to be like, you know what? Yes, this like is a problem. Let me change it.
I gotta know that you guys.
know?
This is a very, very important topic, and for that reason, just a disclaimer: this is going to be a 2-part segment where. Right now, we were just unpacking a little bit of the personal experiences that we've had with trauma and relationships. But then in the next episode, I think we're going to get in a professional. We're going to get in a psychologist that can just kind of take us deeper into.
Okay, no, you can finish.
Yeah,
sorry.
because we're wrapping up.
Yeah,
We're
I
wrapping
just
this
have
party
last
up.
Last question to both
Okay,
of you.
yeah.
But like, have you guys? I've never seen a psychologist before.
Mm.
I've never done any of that. Have you guys done it before?
Child, it's expensive.
I've
I'm
been
so sorry if you
to-
want to sponsor us. Please, I'm first.
You know,
but
I'm
it's
here too.
expensive.
Yeah, I've heard
It's a
that
lot.
it's expensive.
I've been to 4 different ones
Mm.
because I think it's a process. Like I found one that really works for me, but then, you know, it's also complications. Like as Elizabeth said, it's very pricey, but at the same time, it's so important. And honestly, I'll tell you guys what now. My trauma was so deep. My therapist was like, you know what, girl, I'm going to give you pro bono sessions.
Oh my gosh, I wish
That's
they
what
could.
she said. That's what she said. She's like, you know what? I'm going to give you pro bono sessions. And the whole of last year, was it? We did pro bono sessions. And
I think in our
You
part
know,
two,
I'm a trying
I
hand.
think a good topic to touch on is like not everybody can afford it.
yeah.
Yes. So how do you-
the people
Yeah.
who aren't able to provide themselves with the luxury of a psychologist,
yeah.
how are you going to deal with your trauma?
Okay.
You know, I think that's
I think
Oh,
that's where-
julle gesê ons wat stories. We will not end. So, lastly, just before we wrap it up, a few things. I just want to say that if you've enjoyed this conversation as much as we have, please like, comment, and subscribe. I know it's so cliche to say that, but please do it. Also, communicate with us on our Instagram channel. It's myzone_NMH. There you can send us questions or ideas of what you guys would want us to talk about.
even in the comment section.
Yeah,
down
comment
below.
us, please, guys. We do read and we would love to hear from you. And then just these few points that I'd like to point out before we leave. And this will then flow over into our episode 2. It says, I Googled this, guys. Google is toch onze vriend. So it says that resolving the unresolved. So these are just a few points that you can consider when doing that. It's understand your trauma and its effects. Share your story on platforms such as this. Develop witness consciousness. Share the trigger. Develop emotional resilience. Learn new ways of self-soothing. Consider the spiritual dimension. And last but certainly not least, take your time. With that said, yeah, from me, Elizabeth, and my 2 lovely guests, it's certainly not goodbye, but I'll see you later.